Good morning, Achoja Warriors. Another great day together. Thankful for your time. Today, as we continue in Black History Month, we're going to talk about Robert F. Smith. Now, Robert F. Smith, you may have heard of him recently in the news, and last year he donated about $40 million to pay off a graduating class of Morehouse's student loan debt. And that is actually not the first time he's been very giving in his efforts to help uplift the black community as far as restoring black wealth. So I think Robert Smith would be an excellent place for us to look to track the pattern that we're also going to recognize and to just see what tips we can glean from his life experiences. So if you haven't heard of his upbringing, his life story, Robert F. Smith, he was actually born to two professors. Both of his parents were educators, so they put a lot of emphasis on the importance of learning, of growth, of education, and the ability that it affords you so that it opens other doors for you. Now, I will say that what you will notice, and I think what a lot of people miss, is education gets a bad rap nowadays because of how expensive college is, and a lot of people feel it's outdated. But a couple facts, and I'll let you kind of choose on your own. So number one is you'll still see that the average income someone has that goes to college is still significantly higher than someone who doesn't. I believe the numbers is somewhere around like 1.5, 2 million is what someone with a high school diploma on average will generate, and about 3.5 million is what you'll see the average bachelor's degree generate from college. Now, of course, I understand we're like, hey, Dre, there's also a lot of moving factors, and I agree, right? You're going to have to choose different majors and some different choices along the way as far as who you network with. What I will say for me personally is if you are looking to open a company or something of that nature and you feel like you don't need college, I don't think everyone needs to go to college. If you want to learn a skill or a craft, I think that's fine too. I don't think everyone needs to go to college. But we still all, I think, would agree that it's a good idea for our doctors to go to college. I think we still agree it's a good idea for different attorneys to go to college. So there is some value that you'll find in certain degrees. And I'll usually say that if you're in that STEM umbrella, where you're doing like science and engineering and math, that it's usually a good idea to work on that, to hone that skill, and you'll get some expertise. So this is no different for Robert. He actually has a chemical engineering degree, and that is what he ended up being able to do, and it opened a lot of doors for him. Where some of his first jobs, he was at like Goodyear, and he did some work at Kraft Foods, where he was able to work and kind of be introduced and network with people. He ended up going back to get his MBA from Cornell University, and he got it in finance and marketing. And I will say that you'll find that one of the benefits that I think is often overlooked in college is the network of people that you're surrounded with. There are going to be people within all sorts of walks of life, and I tell my kids all the time, look, if you decide to go to college, please make sure that you're hanging out with the people who are doing things. Don't hang out with people that are just having fun. See if you can find the next like Apple. See if you can find the next like Uber or something like that. Like, see if you can find someone who has this brilliant idea and they just want to get your input, and you may be able to build something with them, right? Like Facebook was started by a group of college kids. So you just have to be able to say, you know what? There is a lot of opportunity here. There is a lot of successful, hungry people, but there are also distractions. There are people who are just there who will not be there next year. And I think you have to just really understand, what is your goal when you're going to college? Are you just trying to get a piece of paper so that you can get a job and work 40 years? If that's your plan, then execute your plan. However that works. You may not need to network with the most influential people. That may not be a big deal for that type of a plan. If your plan is to, similar to what Robert did, if your plan is to go to college, as far as his MBA, if your plan is to go to college to network with people, to meet interesting people, to learn and grow, and then execute on that plan for maybe 5 to 10 years, and then you make a transition, well, I think that is a better use of your time. You really don't need like 10, 20, 30, 40 years into a profession before you've mastered the craft. Where I would recommend, and you often see with these millionaires and billionaires, as we're talking about restoring black wealth, they end up creating their own company, their own business. So what Robert ended up doing is he ended up working for Goldman Sachs in the mergers and acquisitions department, which is a great place to be if you have any intentions of like purchasing companies and doing like angel investing and different things of that nature. So Robert spent about 6 years there, from like 94 to 2000, and he was able to work on different acquisitions for like eBay and like different companies that were very large, very successful. And he ultimately ended up moving out to California, living in Silicon Valley, and he opened up a Goldman Sachs office out there. And he was the co-head manager, and he was doing the same thing where you are generating a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars for Goldman Sachs, then you get paid pretty well, right? You're still going to be a millionaire doing that. So don't get me wrong. But after 6 years, Robert decided, you know what, I believe I got it all. I believe I know exactly what makes a good investment, what characteristics of one that isn't going to work, how much you should go for, like what makes sense. He's learned the craft. And I think that that's really important to understand is you can't just immediately say, okay, I have this vision, I'm going to go create it, but you don't have any foundation. Most of the time you're going to need to start and get a blueprint, right? There's not a reason for us to just go out there and completely be like, oh, I'm just going to reinvent the whole wheel. I mean, you can, but wouldn't it be better to spend 6 years within a company that already figured it all out than to spend 20 years creating a new wheel that may net you the same or maybe a little bit less? So I think that it's important to maximize your time. We have to put our ego aside and say, you know what? I'm going to see what I can absorb, what I can learn. But after you got that information, you'll want to do what Robert did. And what he did is he ended up leaving Goldman Sachs and he created his own equity. It was Vista Equity. And so he was able to take a lot of the skills that he was learning from Goldman Sachs and he was able to apply it to his own company. And so Vista Equity, it ends up just it gets awarded and it's considered like the gold star of like buyouts. I read an article in Buyout Magazine from 2012, and it was just praising how well this company is run. And you're looking like, okay, well, how did a chemical engineer become a CEO and chairman and president of his own equity fund? And when you're trying to figure, okay, well, what does a hedge fund manager do? What does someone who invests in businesses do? What does someone do? Where does he get that experience? And you would go back to the Goldman Sachs days when he was in the mergers and acquisitions department. And I've actually seen a little bit of a pattern, just that within itself, that if you are able to work in the mergers and acquisition department, you learn so much that it just makes sense. And you get paid pretty well. Like, let's not, mix that up. You get paid pretty well, so now you have the money to work with, and then you're able to take that money, and then you should create your own company. And then from there, you're able to start making the same decisions, except you're getting a larger piece of the pie. And the way I would often describe it jokingly is that when you're working at a company, your job is to generally go out and find a large bag of money, and then to take that money back to the company, and then they will give you a smaller bag from the larger bag you gave them. So once you have mastered like where to go look for the bags, how to get the bags, how to negotiate, what to do with the money, well then all you have to do is pay like $100 and something to open your own company, and then you would go and start finding the big bags for yourself. Now, granted, I'm not trying to downplay it, make it sound like it's easy, because it takes a lot of work. There's a reason that the majority of businesses are gone within 5 years. It is not an easy thing to do. And everybody who is a good player doesn't automatically make them a good coach. Like, I understand all of that as well. But I would say that you will find that at some point, the next reasonable action to take is to create your own company. It is not an accident that a lot of the list that I've been able to put together, it was not intentional, but it's also not a coincidence that most of them end up having a company of some kind. Even if you just want to simply talk about from a tax perspective of the benefits that you find from having a company versus just keeping the money in like your mattress or your bank account. Right? There's just so much reasons that it makes sense to eventually have your own company. And now with Vista Equity Partners, Robert has, I believe it was like over like 50,000 employees. Absolutely significant impact, massive. And he was able to do that from a company that he opened in 2000 till today. And now it says that he's managed somewhere around like $50 billion of transactions, where his net worth is estimated somewhere around like $5 billion. He's seen as the richest Black person in America from his different work. And so you really have to understand, again, as I always tell you, the income that you have is directly tied to the value that you provide others. So in his case, he's getting paid millions of dollars. Why? because he's making other people billions of dollars, right? It's just that simple of a calculation. So what can you do that gives you the ability to provide value in other people's lives, other companies' lives, and on a large scale, where you can start scaling and growing and being able to impact your community? Because what I didn't mention, as far as his parents and them being educators, and you often see that the parents kind of give that love tap early on. His mom, it says that she would write a check for the United Negro College Fund, $25 every single month, and that Robert saw that growing up. It influenced him. He knew the importance of giving back to his community to help those that are trying to come up, and so he has done that along the way himself. He's kept that, where he's on the board for the board of leadership for the MLK of Washington D.C., where he does work, where you, like we mentioned already, where he donated $40 million to pay off that graduating class of Morehouse's student loan debt. He's also, and less publicized, he's also given $20 million to the Smithsonian Museum for them to have the African American and culture exhibit, like to give towards that. He's also given $20 million to Cornell so that they're able to invest more money into getting blacks to be able to into their engineering program. So he's always trying to find ways to give back to his community, because it's like, what benefit is it if you have the influence, if you have the money, if you have the success, if you've found some sort of a blueprint, if you're not able to replicate that within your community to help it grow? So I salute Robert Smith for his commitment to others, and I'm sure he gives in more ways than are recorded, and especially of his time and his influence, right? Just the fact that he's speaking at some of these colleges, trying to help the next generation. This is where the value really comes from. You're trying to build a legacy. You're trying to make the world a better place. You have that inner drumbeat as you're chasing happiness. Most of the time, it's tied to leaving the world better than you found it. And while it's a really big place, each person that you impact, you just got to save one. Each person that you impact in a positive way makes that much better of a world for tomorrow. Don't get overwhelmed trying to save everybody. Just save one and keep going from there. And so that'll be a mindset moment. Always thankful for our time, for your time. I hope that you're enjoying this Black History Month segment, and as we continue growing, until next time, continue blessings on your journey to become the champion of your dream life. And as always, better self, better wealth.